Imagine owning one of the most renowned hotels in your city, a place you've invested every ounce of passion into, crafting each detail to ensure an oasis of luxury for travelers. Now, imagine slipping into that very hotel incognito, dressed in unassuming clothes, ready to experience it as any ordinary guest would. No VIP treatment, no special acknowledgements, just a straightforward stay to observe how your team performs when they don't know you're watching. But what if your visit revealed more than you bargained for? Cold stares, dismissive remarks, and even outright discrimination. This is exactly what happened to Olivia Grant, a self-made entrepreneur and proud owner of the opulent Haven Crest Hotel. Donning simple jeans and a plain shirt, Olivia decided to step into her creation with a low profile, aiming to blend in and gain authentic insights into her staff's behavior. What she encountered instead was shocking. A complete dismissal based not only on her casual attire, but also, perhaps, on her appearance. To her disbelief, she was denied service, faced condescension, and eventually found herself escorted off the premises by security, all without the staff realizing that the person they were belittling was their employer. The irony wasn't lost on Olivia. She had spent years building the Haven Crest into a beacon of elegance and inclusivity, a sanctuary where every guest, regardless of status, was to feel welcomed and valued. Yet here she stood, unrecognized and dismissed, a victim of the very prejudice she sought to eliminate. What would you do in Olivia's position? Would you immediately reveal your identity and confront the staff? Or would you choose to remain in disguise, investigating further to uncover the full scope of the problem? This is the beginning of Olivia's extraordinary story, one that unravels with unexpected twists as she peels back layers of prejudice and corruption within the walls of her own hotel. It is not merely a tale of facing discrimination, but a testament to resilience, the pursuit of justice, and a commitment to creating a place where all are treated with respect and dignity. Olivia Grant wasn't always a hotel mogul. She built her career from the ground up, overcoming countless challenges to realize her dream of owning a luxury hotel. The Haven Crest was her masterpiece, a reflection of her dedication to creating a haven of sophistication, comfort, and unparalleled service. After years of managing operations from a distance and trusting her team to uphold her vision, she decided it was time to see her hotel from a new perspective, that of an everyday guest. She chose her approach carefully. No fanfare, no announcements, just a quiet and unassuming entry. On the day of her unannounced visit, Olivia dressed as plainly as possible in worn jeans, a simple t-shirt, and comfortable sneakers. She knew that if she wanted a genuine experience, her appearance needed to be as inconspicuous as possible. As she stepped out of her car and took a deep breath, a mix of excitement and curiosity filled her. What would she discover about the hotel she'd poured her heart and soul into? Walking through the grand entrance, Olivia was momentarily overwhelmed with pride. The lobby was everything she'd envisioned. Dazzling crystal chandeliers casting warm light onto polished marble floors, elegant artwork adorning the walls, and the subtle scent of fresh flowers blending with the luxurious aroma of leather and wood. The hum of cheerful conversation and the soft strains of classical music added a layer of refinement to the space. For a brief moment, she stood in awe, watching the seamless interaction of staff and guests. Bellhop's expertly maneuvered luggage, the concierge smiled warmly as they assisted a group of travelers, and everything appeared as perfect as she had imagined. But Olivia knew appearances could be deceiving, and she was determined to go deeper. With her heart swelling with pride, but her mind focused on the task ahead, Olivia approached the front desk. What she didn't yet realize was that this visit would unveil not just cracks in her hotel's operations, but a systemic issue she couldn't afford to ignore. The sight filled Olivia with a sense of pride. Everything appeared to be running smoothly, at least on the surface. Encouraged, she decided to move forward with her plan to test the check-in process. She approached the front desk, eager to see how her staff treated an ordinary guest. Behind the counter stood a young man in a sharp navy suit, his attention fixed on the glowing screen of his computer. Olivia waited patiently, giving him a moment to finish his work, but seconds turned into an uncomfortable stretch of silence. The man didn't so much as glance her way. Clearing her throat lightly, She stepped forward, hoping to catch his attention. Finally, the receptionist lifted his eyes for a brief, dismissive glance before returning to his typing. His indifference was palpable, and Olivia felt a pang of disappointment but chose to remain patient. He's probably busy, she thought, brushing off the behavior. After another long moment, she decided to speak. "Good afternoon," she said politely, her tone calm but firm. "I'd like to check in, please." The receptionist slowly looked up, his eyebrows arching slightly. Instead of the welcoming smile Olivia had hoped for, his expression soured as his gaze traveled from her simple jeans to her plain sneakers. The judgment in his eyes was unmistakable, and his voice was void of warmth as he asked, "Do you have a reservation?" Surprised by his curt tone, Olivia shook her head. "No, I was hoping to book a room for tonight." The receptionist's demeanor shifted slightly, his lips pressing into a thin line as if her request was an inconvenience. "This is a luxury hotel, ma'am," he replied, his words laced with subtle condescension. "We have certain standards for our guests. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at one of the other hotels nearby." Olivia felt a surge of shock at his words. This was her hotel, the very place she had envisioned as a beacon of inclusivity and warmth. To stand here now, dismissed by her own staff, was both surreal and infuriating. Her cheeks flushed slightly, a mix of embarrassment and indignation bubbling within her. "Is there a problem with booking a room here?" she asked, her voice steady but firm. She hoped her calm tone might encourage him to reconsider his approach, but he barely hid his irritation as he sighed. "We're quite full at the moment," he said flatly, though Olivia's sharp eyes caught the open guest ledger on his desk. Several rooms were clearly available. "Like I said," he continued, his tone unmoving, "maybe another place would be a better fit." For a moment, Olivia considered revealing her identity, knowing it would instantly change his attitude, but she held back. This wasn't about her. It was about understanding how her staff treated all guests, especially those who didn't meet their superficial standards. "I'm willing to pay whatever the rate is," she said firmly, refusing to back down. "Could you please check for availability?" The receptionist hesitated, his face tightening with reluctance, but after a long pause, he begrudgingly began typing into his computer. A few moments later, he nodded stiffly. "We have one room available," he admitted, though his tone made it clear he wasn't pleased. "Thank you," Olivia replied, her patience stretched thin but her composure intact. She completed the check-in process, noting every interaction and subtle expression as she accepted the room key. As she walked away from the desk, Olivia couldn't shake the unease settling over her. This encounter had left her both disappointed and determined. If this was how her staff treated someone they assumed was an unremarkable guest, she couldn't help but wonder how many others had been subjected to the same dismissive attitude. With a quiet resolve, Olivia decided this was only the beginning of her investigation. The superficial hospitality she had just experienced would not define the culture of the Haven Crest, not if she had anything to say about it. This wasn't just about her. Olivia resolved to dig deeper, determined to uncover whether this was an isolated incident or a symptom of a more troubling pattern within her beloved Haven Crest hotel. Reaching her room, Olivia paused, steeling herself for what she knew would be a difficult but necessary investigation. She intended to quietly observe, taking mental notes of every interaction and how her team treated all guests, especially those who didn't appear affluent or stylish. She decided to begin in the main lobby, a hub of activity where the true essence of the hotel's service should shine. Taking a seat in a quiet corner, Olivia watched intently as guests came and went. It didn't take long for her observations to confirm her suspicions. A couple dressed in designer clothing approached the front desk, where the same receptionist who had dismissed her earlier greeted them with enthusiasm. His warm smile and courteous demeanor were a stark contrast to the indifferent treatment Olivia had received. She watched as the receptionist not only offered the couple an upgrade, but went out of his way to ensure they had every comfort imaginable. Olivia's frustration grew. The disparity in treatment was glaring. How many other guests had experienced the same condescending judgment she had? Determined not to let her initial encounter define her investigation, Olivia decided to test another aspect of the hotel's service. She made her way to the restaurant. a key feature of the Haven Crest's reputation. At the entrance, a young hostess stood behind a sleek podium, her expression distant as she scrolled through a tablet. Olivia approached with a polite smile. "Good evening," she said, keeping her tone friendly. The hostess finally looked up, her eyes sweeping over Olivia's casual attire. A flicker of judgment crossed her face, and her tone was cool as she asked, "Do you have a reservation?" "No," Olivia replied calmly. "I was hoping to get a table for one. It's just me." The hostess barely glanced toward the dining area. "We're fully booked tonight," she said briskly, her words leaving little room for discussion. "You might try somewhere else nearby." Stunned, Olivia hesitated. From her vantage point, she could clearly see multiple empty tables scattered throughout the restaurant. It wasn't even peak dinner time, and there was no sign of a waiting crowd. "I understand," Olivia said carefully, keeping her voice polite. "But are you sure? I can see a few open tables right now." She gestured toward the vacant spots, offering a patient smile. The hostess barely glanced in the direction Olivia indicated. "They're reserved," she replied curtly, her eyes narrowing slightly as if daring Olivia to challenge her further. Olivia felt her patience begin to wane. The dismissive tone, the lack of effort to accommodate her, and the underlying attitude of condescension were wearing thin. But years of running a successful business had taught Olivia the value of maintaining her composure, even in the face of frustration. "Thank you," Olivia said evenly, though disappointment tugged at her voice. She turned and walked away from the restaurant, her mind racing. This wasn't just about one dismissive receptionist or a distant hostess. There was a larger issue at play, a subtle yet pervasive culture of judgment that had no place in the Haven Crest. As Olivia retreated to a quiet spot to reflect, her resolve only deepened. These interactions had revealed cracks in the very foundation of her hotel's values. Olivia had always envisioned the Haven Crest as a place of warmth, inclusivity, and exceptional service for everyone, but it was clear that vision had been compromised. Determined to uncover the full extent of the problem, Olivia knew she couldn't stop here. She would continue to observe, question, and test every aspect of the hotel's operations. Whatever was lurking beneath the surface, she was going to find it and fix it. As she left the restaurant, Olivia's thoughts raced. This was her hotel, a place she had envisioned as an inclusive sanctuary of luxury and warmth. Yet her staff, the very people tasked with upholding her vision, seemed to be turning guests away based on superficial judgments. The bitter reality of what she'd witnessed was hard to accept, but Olivia's determination to uncover the truth only grew stronger. Needing a moment to process, she made her way to the lounge. She found a quiet seat in the corner, hoping to observe how other guests were treated in this space. Her observations didn't take long to confirm her worst fears. A group of well-dressed guests entered, and the staff sprang into action. They were offered complimentary refreshments and attended to with cheerful smiles. Meanwhile, Olivia, sitting inconspicuously in her casual attire, was ignored entirely. Her phone buzzed, breaking her train of thought. It was a message from her assistant, Grace. "Everything running smoothly at the hotel?" The timing was almost laughable. For a brief moment, Olivia considered replying with the truth, venting her frustration at what she had encountered so far. But she decided against it, opting to gather more evidence before escalating the matter. Her reflections were interrupted when a well-dressed man in a crisp uniform approached. His demeanor was formal and polite, but there was a subtle edge to his tone that made his hospitality feel more like an obligation than a genuine offer. "Good evening, ma'am," he said, stopping a few feet away. "May I assist you with anything?" Olivia decided to test his sincerity. "Yes, actually," she replied evenly. "Could you direct me to the nearest elevator?" He gestured down the hallway with an almost mechanical smile, his reluctance thinly veiled. "It's just to your right, ma'am," he said curtly before stepping away without further acknowledgement. The interaction was brief, yet it added to the mounting evidence of indifference and subtle prejudice. Olivia felt her chest tighten with disappointment. These were not isolated incidents. They were patterns, and each interaction painted a more troubling picture of her staff's attitude toward guests who didn't fit their unspoken ideals. Before heading to her room, Olivia made one last attempt to test the service. She approached the concierge desk, hoping to find a glimmer of the inclusivity she had envisioned for the Haven Crest Hotel. The concierge, a middle-aged woman with impeccably styled hair and a polished uniform, glanced up briefly as Olivia approached. Her eyes swept over Olivia's casual appearance before she offered a perfunctory smile. "Good evening," she said, her tone neutral but distant. "I was hoping to get some recommendations for things to do nearby," Olivia began, keeping her tone polite. The concierge's smile tightened as if the conversation was an inconvenience. "There's a diner a few blocks down," she said, her voice clipped. "It's popular with locals. You might enjoy it." The suggestion was perfunctory, lacking effort or thoughtfulness. Olivia thanked her quietly and walked away, her heart sinking further. The Haven Crest was supposed to be a haven of welcoming luxury, a place where every guest was valued and treated with respect. What she had encountered instead was a culture that judged and excluded based on appearances. As Olivia rode the elevator to her room, she made a silent vow. This wasn't the end of her investigation. She would continue observing, documenting, and uncovering the truth about her hotel's operations. Her vision for the Grand Horizon would not be tarnished by superficial bias. One way or another, she would restore it to the inclusive sanctuary she had always dreamed it would be. As the elevator ascended, Olivia resolved to act, but she would do so carefully and strategically. Simply revealing her identity and demanding immediate change might yield apologies and temporary fixes, but it wouldn't address the root of the problem. To truly understand and resolve the issues, she needed a complete picture of the problem, and that meant continuing to investigate quietly. When the elevator doors opened to her floor, Olivia stepped out with renewed determination. She would reclaim her vision for Haven Crest and ensure it became the inclusive, respectful haven she had always dreamed of. After her frustrating experiences at the front desk and with the concierge, Olivia decided to test the restaurant again. Perhaps her earlier encounter with the dismissive hostess had been a fluke. Maybe the young woman had been preoccupied or distracted. Taking a deep breath, Olivia approached the restaurant entrance once more, carefully setting aside her growing frustration. The same hostess stood at the podium, her focus on a tablet in front of her. When she noticed Olivia approaching, she let out a faint sigh, her disinterest palpable. "Hello again," Olivia said, maintaining a polite demeanor. "I was wondering if there might be a table available now." The hostess didn't bother glancing toward the dining area. Instead, she shook her head. "As I mentioned earlier, we're fully booked," she replied flatly, her voice devoid of warmth. Olivia glanced past the hostess into the restaurant. The room was dotted with empty tables, some fully set with fresh silverware and menus, ready for guests who had yet to arrive. Keeping her voice steady, Olivia said, "I see quite a few open tables. Are they all reserved?" The hostess's eyes narrowed slightly, her tone growing colder. "Yes, they're reserved," she said curtly, not bothering to elaborate. Olivia's patience was wearing thin. For years, she had led her business with a commitment to respect and excellence. To see her staff acting this way, especially in a space she had designed as an inclusive escape, was infuriating. "I don't mean to press," Olivia said evenly, "but it seems you have more than enough availability. I'd be happy to wait for a table, or you could notify me if one becomes free." The hostess crossed her arms, her expression hardening further. "Ma'am," she said, her voice dripping with irritation, "I don't think this is the kind of establishment that suits you. There are plenty of other places nearby that might be more fitting." The implication hit Olivia like a slap. This wasn't just about her attire or a simple misunderstanding. This was a deliberate attempt to dismiss her, rooted in an assumption that she didn't belong in the very space she had built. For the first time, the reality of the issue truly sank in. This wasn't just one dismissive employee or an isolated incident. It was a cultural problem that had somehow taken root in Haven Crest. A problem that was now her responsibility to uproot. Clenching her fists at her sides, Olivia nodded calmly and walked away. Her resolve had never been stronger. This wasn't just a fight for her business. It was a fight for the values she had poured into it from the start. No guest, regardless of appearance, should ever be made to feel like they didn't belong. Before Olivia Carter could respond further, the hostess shot her a final dismissive glance and turned her attention back to her tablet, effectively cutting off the conversation. Olivia's heart pounded with a potent mix of disbelief and frustration. How had it come to this? Why did her staff think it was acceptable to treat anyone this way, especially in a place she had designed to welcome all with grace and dignity? Determined to maintain her cover, Olivia stepped away from the podium and began walking back toward the lobby. Her thoughts swirled, her mind racing to piece together how her establishment had veered so far from her vision. As she neared the lobby, her steps faltered. She noticed a couple entering the restaurant, casually dressed but undeniably polished in appearance. They, too, approached the hostess without a reservation. Unlike Olivia, they were greeted with a bright smile, escorted to one of the many reserved tables, and handed menus with warmth and enthusiasm. The sight made Olivia's heart sink. This was no isolated incident. It was clear that her staff were making assumptions about who deserved excellent service based on superficial judgments. The realization was a bitter pill to swallow. As Olivia's eyes lingered on the couple settling into their seats, she was startled by a firm voice behind her. "Ma'am, we need you to leave." She turned around, her breath catching in her throat, to find two uniformed security guards standing behind her. Their expressions were stern and unyielding. For a moment, Olivia was too stunned to speak. Her initial shock gave way to disbelief. She hadn't caused a scene. She hadn't raised her voice. Yet here were security guards treating her as if she were a troublemaker. "Excuse me?" she asked, her voice wavering between confusion and indignation. "Is there a problem?" One of the guards stepped forward. "We've been informed that you're causing a disturbance," he said flatly. "Management has asked that you vacate the premises." Olivia blinked, the words landing like a slap. A disturbance? She had been nothing but polite, even in the face of the dismissive and unprofessional behavior she'd encountered. Her frustration, held in check for so long, began to peak. But Olivia knew better than to lose her composure. She swallowed her anger and replied steadily, "I'm a paying guest. I haven't done anything wrong. I've been quietly using the amenities of this hotel, which I believe I'm entitled to. Why am I being asked to leave?" The guard's expression softened momentarily, as if he realized the absurdity of the situation, but his professional demeanor quickly returned. "We're just following orders, ma'am. If you refuse to leave, we'll have to escort you out." Glancing around the lobby, Olivia saw guests beginning to take notice. Whispered conversations rippled through the crowd as curious onlookers turned their attention to the unfolding scene. Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Olivia's first instinct was to reveal her identity, to tell these guards exactly who she was, and watch them scramble to undo their mistake. But she stopped herself. Acting in anger wouldn't help. It would only cloud her judgment and disrupt her mission to uncover the extent of the problem. Besides, if they were willing to treat her, a stranger in their eyes, this way, how many other guests had faced similar hostility? Taking a deep breath, Olivia squared her shoulders. "All right," she said, her voice measured but firm. "I'll leave." She walked slowly toward the exit, the guards following closely behind. As she stepped out into the cool evening air, she paused to collect her thoughts. The experience had been nothing short of humiliating, but it had also lit a fire within her. Olivia wasn't just going to walk away. This was her life's work, her legacy. She had poured her heart into making Haven Crest Hotel a beacon of elegance and inclusivity, and she couldn't allow it to devolve into a place where anyone was treated as lesser. Pulling out her phone, Olivia dialed Grace, her trusted assistant, who answered on the first ring. "Grace," Olivia began, her voice steady despite the emotions simmering beneath the surface. "We have a serious problem." Grace immediately picked up on the urgency. "What happened?" Olivia hesitated, glancing back at the glowing lights of the hotel behind her. "I can't go into details right now, but I'm starting to see a culture of exclusion and discrimination within our staff. I need to dig deeper, and I need your help. Meet me at the office first thing tomorrow morning." "You've got it," Grace replied without hesitation. "Whatever you need, I'm here." As Olivia ended the call, she took another deep breath. The road ahead would be challenging, but she was ready. Tomorrow, she would begin the process of uncovering every layer of dysfunction that had crept into her hotel and rooted out for good. Haven Crest Hotel was her dream, her responsibility, and she was determined to reclaim it, not just for herself, but for every guest who deserved the respect and care her staff had failed to provide. Walking away from the hotel, the sting of the night's events lingered. The treatment she had endured from her own staff was deeply hurtful, but it had also opened her eyes. If she had revealed her identity from the start, she would never have uncovered the deeper issues plaguing her business. Her decision to go undercover had been difficult but necessary, and the insights she had gained were invaluable. Tomorrow, she resolved she would step back into her role, not to flaunt her authority, but to ensure her dream of a welcoming, inclusive hotel became a reality once more. The following morning, Olivia met Grace in her office, detailing the humiliating encounters she had experienced the night before. Grace listened intently, her expression shifting from shock to indignation as Olivia described being ignored, dismissed, and even escorted out of her own establishment by security. "This is unacceptable," Grace said, her voice filled with anger. "We need to get to the bottom of this." "We do," Olivia agreed, "but we can't act based solely on what I experienced yesterday. I need to know if this was an isolated incident or part of a larger pattern affecting other guests." She paused, her resolve hardening. "I'll need to go undercover again, but this time we'll be more strategic about it." Grace nodded, her eyes bright with determination. "Whatever you need, I'm here to help." Together, they devised a plan. Olivia would return to the Haven Crest Hotel under a false identity, immersing herself in the experience over several days. She would test every aspect of the service, not just the front desk and restaurant staff, but also room service, housekeeping, and other amenities. Grace quickly booked a reservation under the name Ella Brooks, ensuring it wouldn't be recognized by anyone on the team. They selected a standard room to reflect the experience of an average guest, avoiding anything that might draw attention. That evening, Olivia returned to the Haven Crest, fully prepared to see her investigation through. She wore a modest dress and minimal accessories, presenting a refined but understated appearance. Every detail of her presentation was carefully considered to blend in and avoid raising suspicion. Approaching the front desk with calm resolve, she was greeted by a different receptionist, a young woman with a warm smile that contrasted sharply with the cold indifference Olivia had encountered the previous night. "Good evening, ma'am. Welcome to the Haven Crest Hotel. How can I assist you?" Olivia felt a flicker of relief at the receptionist's polite demeanor, but reminded herself to remain cautious. "I have a reservation under the name Ella Brooks," she replied evenly. The receptionist quickly typed into her computer, her professional smile unwavering. "Yes, Miss Brooks," she said. "I see your reservation for a 3-night stay. Let me get you checked in," the receptionist said with a warm smile. "Let me get you checked in." The process was smooth and professional, a stark contrast to the dismissive treatment Olivia Carter had received just a day earlier. The receptionist handed over the keycard with a friendly nod. "If you need anything during your stay, please don't hesitate to let us know." Olivia thanked her, feeling a sense of relief, but also a keen awareness of how different this interaction had been from her last experience at the Haven Crest Hotel. As she walked to her room, she noted the change. This time, there were no judgmental stares or dismissive tones. Once settled in her room, Olivia sat on the edge of the bed and planned her next move. She decided to test room service, curious if the disparities in treatment extended beyond the front desk and restaurant. Picking up the phone, she ordered a simple dinner, a club sandwich, fries, and a glass of sparkling water. The voice on the other end was courteous, assuring her the meal would arrive within 30 minutes. True to the promise, there was a knock on her door exactly half an hour later. Olivia opened the door to find a middle-aged man in a neatly pressed uniform holding a tray with her order. His demeanor was polite and professional, but she noticed a subtle shift in his expression when his eyes flicked over her understated appearance. It was fleeting, but she caught the way his gaze lingered, as if making a quiet judgment. She thanked him, tipped generously, and watched as he offered a quick goodbye, avoiding further eye contact. Closing the door, Olivia sighed. Was she reading too much into these interactions? Or was there truly an underlying tension in the way staff reacted to her? Trusting her instincts, she jotted down notes in her journal, determined to keep a thorough record of every encounter. The next morning, Olivia decided to visit the hotel's spa, one of its most highly praised amenities. Known for its luxurious treatments, it was a favorite among guests seeking relaxation. She approached the spa's reception desk, where a woman greeted her with a polite smile that quickly faded as her eyes swept over Olivia's simple attire. "Good morning," Olivia said, keeping her tone friendly. "I'd like to book a massage." The receptionist hesitated, her professional demeanor faltering. "Do you have a reservation?" she asked, her tone polite but distant. "No," Olivia replied. "I was hoping there might be an opening later today." The receptionist gave a small, tight smile and tapped on her computer. Olivia could sense her reluctance, as if the effort to check availability was itself a chore. "It looks like we're fully booked for the day," the woman said after a pause. "I might be able to fit you in tomorrow, but we prioritize reservations." Olivia nodded, the familiar chill of indifference washing over her. As she stepped back from the desk, she noticed other guests entering the spa. Dressed in fine clothing and exuding an air of wealth, they were greeted warmly and offered treatments without hesitation. Adding another note to her growing list of observations, Olivia left the spa, her disheartenment deepening. Throughout the day, Olivia continued testing various areas of the hotel. She visited the pool, observed the service in the lounge, and interacted with housekeeping. The pattern was unmistakable. Guests who appeared affluent or fashionable were greeted with enthusiasm and attended to promptly, while those who seemed less affluent, like Olivia in her modest attire, were met with polite indifference or ignored entirely. In the evening, Olivia decided to try the restaurant once more. This time, she was given a table without issue, but the hostess's faintly skeptical expression lingered as she showed Olivia to her seat. As she dined, Olivia paid close attention to the service around her. Guests adorned in expensive jewelry or dressed in designer clothing were treated with attentive, cheerful service. Their servers engaged warmly, ensuring their every need was met. Meanwhile, diners dressed more simply received noticeably less attention. Her mind raced as she connected the dots. A clear pattern of bias was emerging, deeply embedded in her staff's attitudes toward guests. It wasn't always overt, but it was pervasive. Small gestures, tones, and decisions that revealed a subtle yet undeniable hierarchy of treatment. By the time Olivia returned to her room, her resolve had only grown stronger. The Haven Crest Hotel had strayed far from the inclusive, respectful environment she had worked so hard to create. The biases she had uncovered were unacceptable, and she was determined to confront them head-on. This wasn't just about correcting a few bad habits. It was about dismantling a culture that judged guests based on appearances and rebuilding one rooted in genuine hospitality. The very staff she had entrusted to uphold the values of the Haven Crest Hotel were dividing guests into worthy and unworthy categories based on superficial traits like clothing and demeanor. As Olivia finished her meal, the weight of her discovery pressed heavily on her shoulders. She knew she couldn't continue running her hotel in good conscience if this behavior was allowed to persist. Her undercover investigation had revealed an unpleasant truth, but it had also provided the insight she needed to create meaningful change. When she returned to her room that evening, Olivia immediately called Grace, her trusted assistant. "I've seen enough," Olivia said, her voice steady but resolute. "This isn't just about a few bad actors, it's a widespread issue." Grace didn't hesitate. "What's our next step?" "We're going to tackle this from the top down," Olivia replied firmly. "First, we'll conduct a thorough investigation. We need details. Statements from staff who may have witnessed this kind of behavior. Then we'll confront the individuals responsible. And if it's coming from higher up in management, we'll deal with that too." After the call, Olivia sat quietly for a moment, reflecting on her next move. Relief mingled with anger as her mission crystallized in her mind. She had come to the Haven Crest as an anonymous guest to understand the guest experience. What she had uncovered was a systemic culture of bias and discrimination that had taken root in her establishment. It was painful to acknowledge how far her hotel had strayed from her ideals, but Olivia knew she was the only one who could set things right. With a final glance around her room, she steeled herself for the challenges ahead. The path wouldn't be easy, but she was determined to rebuild her hotel's reputation from the inside out. Never again would a guest, regardless of their background or appearance, feel unwelcome at the Haven Crest. The following morning, Olivia and Grace sat in her office, surrounded by stacks of documents and records Grace had meticulously compiled. These weren't just ordinary files. They included years of guest feedback, complaints, and internal reports. At first glance, most reviews painted the hotel in a positive light. But as they dug deeper, disturbing patterns began to emerge. Certain guests, often those who didn't fit the traditional image of luxury, had consistently received subpar treatment. Some complaints detailed experiences of being ignored or spoken to rudely, especially when dressed casually or appearing less affluent. Others described being turned away from the restaurant despite visible empty tables, a scenario Olivia herself had encountered. One guest had noted being passed over at check-in for an upgrade they had specifically requested. Despite seeing other guests receive the upgrade moments later, they were told none were available. The guest's frustrated comment read, "I felt judged and undervalued, as if I wasn't good enough to stay here." Olivia's stomach turned as she read through the complaints. Each one was a painful reminder of how far the Haven Crest had drifted from her vision. She couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. How had she allowed this culture to take root under her watch? Grace flipped to a particularly troubling report. "This one stood out," she said, handing Olivia a document. It detailed an incident where a guest had been given a smaller room after requesting an upgrade, with no explanation provided. When they questioned the decision, they were brushed off by the staff. Meanwhile, other guests, dressed more formally, were seen being offered complimentary upgrades with smiles and enthusiasm. "It's clear there's a systemic issue here," Grace said, her voice heavy with concern. "These aren't isolated incidents. This has been happening for a while." Olivia leaned back in her chair, pinching the bridge of her nose as she absorbed the weight of the evidence. "How did we let it get to this point?" she muttered, half to herself. "This was never what I wanted for the Haven Crest. I built this place to welcome everyone, not to judge them based on appearances." Grace nodded solemnly. "I think it's time to start talking to the staff. We need to figure out where this attitude is coming from." Olivia agreed. "We'll start with the team leads. I want to know what they've observed and whether this culture was actively encouraged or if it grew unchecked." The deeper they dove into the records, the clearer the path ahead became. Olivia would take a multi-pronged approach to root out the toxic behaviors at the Haven Crest. She would talk to staff, identify those responsible for perpetuating discriminatory practices, and implement strict new standards to ensure such behavior could never take hold again. As the morning wore on, Olivia's initial dismay began to transform into determination. She had built the Haven Crest on a foundation of inclusivity and respect, and she wasn't about to let it crumble under the weight of bias and prejudice. Her mission was clear: to rebuild her hotel's culture from the ground up, ensuring that every guest, no matter their background or appearance, felt valued and welcomed. With Grace by her side and the resolve to see this through, Olivia knew she had the tools to reclaim the Haven Crest's true purpose. This was only the beginning, but Olivia was ready for the fight ahead. "Olivia, there's something else I discovered," Grace said cautiously, her tone betraying the weight of her words. "I've been speaking with some of the staff, and one of them, a longtime employee named Marina, mentioned something significant. She's willing to talk to you directly, but she hinted that someone higher up might be orchestrating this behavior." Olivia's heart sank. "Who?" "His name is Mr. Hughes," Grace replied. "He's one of the senior managers in guest relations. According to Marina, he's been subtly encouraging these practices, pushing staff to prioritize certain types of guests over others. He doesn't give direct orders, but his preferences are well known." A surge of frustration swept through Olivia. Mr. Hughes had been with the Haven Crest Hotel almost from the beginning. She had trusted him implicitly to uphold the values of inclusivity and excellence that were the cornerstone of her vision. If he was at the root of this toxic culture, the problem was far worse than she had initially thought. "Can you arrange a meeting with Marina?" Olivia asked, her voice steady but firm. "I need to hear her account firsthand." Grace nodded, already pulling out her phone. "Give me a moment. I'll reach out to her." Within minutes, the meeting was arranged for later that afternoon. Olivia spent the intervening hours preparing herself, her mind a whirlwind of questions and concerns. Marina, a dedicated housekeeper who had been with the hotel for nearly a decade, might hold the key to unraveling the truth. When Marina arrived, she looked visibly nervous. The middle-aged woman smoothed her uniform as she stepped into Olivia's office, her posture both humble and resolute. "Thank you for coming, Marina," Olivia said warmly, offering her a reassuring smile. "I appreciate your willingness to speak with me." Marina nodded, fidgeting slightly with the hem of her uniform. "Thank you, Miss Carter. I wasn't sure if I should say anything. I didn't want to cause trouble." "You're not causing trouble," Olivia assured her. "I just want to understand what's been happening. Please, tell me everything you've noticed." Marina took a deep breath, collecting her thoughts before speaking. "I've been with the hotel since the beginning, Miss Carter. I remember when it first opened, and I know how much effort you put into making it a welcoming place for everyone. But things have changed over the years." Olivia leaned in, her attention unwavering. "What kind of changes?" "At first, it was small things," Marina explained. "We were told to spend extra time preparing rooms for guests who looked wealthy. It seemed harmless. I figured it was about maintaining the hotel's reputation. But over time, it became clear that other guests, those who didn't fit the luxury image, were being treated differently." She hesitated, her tone growing heavier. "They'd be given less attention, and if they asked for special accommodations, their requests were often denied without much thought. I started noticing the same pattern in how they were spoken to, too. Polite but distant. Sometimes dismissive." Olivia felt a knot tighten in her stomach. "And Mr. Hughes?" she asked gently. Marina nodded slowly, her eyes darting briefly to Grace before settling back on Olivia. "He never directly told us to treat people differently, but it was clear what he expected. If a wealthy guest had a complaint, he'd make a big fuss and insist we do whatever it took to make them happy. But if the complaint came from someone he thought wasn't important, he'd dismiss it, or say there wasn't much we could do." Marina's voice wavered slightly. The staff learned quickly what mattered to him, and they started following his lead, prioritizing the guests he wanted to impress and brushing off the rest. Olivia sat back in her chair, her mind racing. Mr. Hughes, someone she had trusted to uphold the highest standards of hospitality, had quietly fostered a culture of favoritism and judgment. His influence hadn't been overt, but it had been insidious enough to trickle down through the staff. "Marina," Olivia said softly, "I can't tell you how much I appreciate your honesty. It takes courage to speak up about something like this." Marina offered a small, tentative smile. "I just want the hotel to be what you always wanted it to be, Miss Carter. A place where everyone feels welcome." "It will be," Olivia replied firmly. "I promise you that." As Marina left the office, Olivia turned to Grace, her determination hardening. "We need to move forward with the investigation," Olivia said. "This confirms what we've been suspecting. This isn't just individual biases, it's systemic, and Mr. Hughes is at the center of it." Grace nodded. "What's the plan?" "First, we'll gather more evidence," Olivia replied. "We need clear documentation of his influence and how it's impacted the culture here. Then, we'll confront him directly. And if it turns others in management have been complicit, we'll deal with them too." For a moment, Olivia allowed herself a breath of calm amidst the storm. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was resolute. The Haven Crest Hotel was her legacy, and she would do whatever it took to restore its values of fairness, respect, and inclusivity. This wasn't just about addressing the toxic behaviors of a few staff members. It was about dismantling a harmful culture and rebuilding one that embodied the ideals she had always envisioned. The next morning, Olivia decided it was time to address the issue head-on. With her experience as an undercover guest and the insights provided by Grace and Marina, she felt ready to take the first step. She began with Oliver, the hotel's frontline manager. Oliver had overseen daily operations for years and had always seemed committed to maintaining the Haven Crest standards. But Olivia needed answers. What had he seen, and how much did he know about the biases that had taken root? She arranged a private meeting in her office, where Oliver arrived looking slightly nervous. He wasn't sure what to expect, but sensed from Olivia's demeanor that it was serious. "Thank you for joining me, Oliver," Olivia began, her tone calm but resolute. "There's something important we need to discuss regarding the culture and practices here at the Haven Crest Hotel." Oliver nodded slowly, his eyes flickering with curiosity and apprehension. "I'm sure you're aware by now," Olivia continued, "that I've been staying in the hotel anonymously as a guest." Oliver's eyes widened in surprise. "Oh, I wasn't aware of that," he admitted, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. "Is everything all right with your stay?" "Yes and no," Olivia replied, her expression serious. "I went undercover to experience the hotel from the perspective of an ordinary guest. What I discovered was both eye-opening and deeply concerning." She paused, watching as Oliver's expression shifted to a mixture of confusion and worry. "I encountered several instances where I was treated as if I didn't belong," Olivia continued. "I was turned away from the restaurant, dismissed by the reception staff, and even asked to leave the premises by security. All of it based on superficial judgments." Oliver's face paled, and he opened his mouth to respond. But Olivia held up a hand. "Let me finish," she said firmly. "This isn't just about me. It's a pattern, a culture that has taken root within our staff. Guests who don't fit a certain image are treated differently, dismissed, ignored, made to feel like they don't belong. I need to understand how this has been allowed to happen." Oliver's shoulders slumped as he let out a shaky breath. "Miss Carter," he began, his voice tinged with regret. "I didn't realize it was this bad, but I'll admit I've seen hints of it. Small things that I should have addressed but didn't. I thought," he hesitated, his guilt evident. "I thought it was just about maintaining the hotel's reputation. I didn't realize how deeply it was affecting our guests, or how widespread it had become." "And Mr. Hughes?" Olivia asked pointedly. Oliver's expression darkened. "He's never explicitly told us to treat guests differently, but his expectations are clear. He makes comments about appearances, about who deserves our best efforts. Over time, the staff learned to prioritize certain types of guests to stay on his good side." Olivia nodded, her frustration mounting. "And you?" "I should have done more," Oliver admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I followed his lead because I didn't want to risk my position. I see now that I was wrong. I failed you in the hotel." Olivia took a deep breath, her anger tempered by a small measure of understanding. "Thank you for your honesty, Oliver," she said. "But this needs to end. I need your full cooperation as we dig deeper into this and hold people accountable. Can I count on you?" Oliver nodded emphatically. "Yes, Miss Carter. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." As Oliver left the office, Olivia leaned back in her chair, the weight of the task ahead pressing down on her. She wasn't just uncovering a few bad practices, she was dismantling a culture that had betrayed everything she stood for. But as daunting as it seemed, Olivia knew she wouldn't stop until the Haven Crest was restored to the inclusive, welcoming sanctuary she had always envisioned. In the following days, Olivia, Grace, and Oliver dove deeper into the investigation. They reviewed guest complaints, conducted discreet interviews with staff members, and analyzed records to document patterns of discriminatory behavior. Slowly but surely, a picture began to emerge. Grace proved invaluable, gathering statements from employees who were willing to share their experiences. Some described feeling pressured to prioritize wealthier or more polished guests, while others admitted they had been reprimanded for showing too much attention to guests who didn't fit Mr. Hughes's unspoken standards. As they sifted through the testimonies and guest feedback, Grace uncovered something alarming in the hotel's financial records. "Olivia, you need to see this," she said, her voice tinged with urgency. She handed over a report that detailed several unusually high expenditures. The payments were irregular and didn't match any known hotel projects or expenses. At first, they seemed random, but upon closer inspection, they appeared to follow a pattern. "What do you think this means?" Olivia asked, her brow furrowing as she studied the figures. Grace tapped her pen against the page. I think it's worth looking into further. These transactions seem off. They don't align with the hotel's typical spending. Olivia's instincts told her this was important. If these expenditures were linked to Mr. Hughes, it would not only strengthen their case, but also reveal another layer of his misconduct. Dig deeper, Olivia instructed. We need to know exactly where this money is going and why. Grace nodded, already jotting down notes. I'll cross-reference these with other accounts and see if I can trace the funds. As the investigation unfolded, Olivia began to see just how deeply Mr. Hughes's influence had corrupted the Havencrest Hotel. The toxic culture he had fostered extended beyond discriminatory practices. It was beginning to appear that financial misconduct might also be at play. But Olivia felt something else, too: determination. The more she uncovered, the clearer her mission became. She wasn't just fighting to remove a toxic influence. She was fighting to restore the heart and soul of the hotel she had worked so hard to build. With every step forward, Olivia inched closer to the truth, and to the justice the Havencrest Hotel so desperately needed. The suspicious payments had been subtle enough to evade notice at first, but over time they had accumulated into a significant sum. As Grace delved deeper into the records, she discovered that these funds had been funneled into accounts not tied to any legitimate department or project at the Havencrest Hotel. Olivia Carter felt her stomach drop as the implications became clear. It was bad enough that Mr. Hughes had been manipulating the staff and fostering a discriminatory culture. Now, there was undeniable evidence that he had also been embezzling funds. This wasn't just a matter of poor ethics, it was a criminal offense. We need to be absolutely sure before moving forward, Olivia told Grace, her voice steady but resolute. If Mr. Hughes has been stealing from the hotel, we need hard evidence that proves his guilt beyond any doubt. Grace nodded, her expression equally determined. I'll keep digging. I'll also reach out to the accounting team discreetly to see if they've noticed any irregularities in the financials. Over the next several days, Grace worked tirelessly to untangle the web of transactions. Meanwhile, Olivia continued conducting discreet interviews with employees who had previously worked under Mr. Hughes. Many staff members expressed a mix of relief and apprehension that someone was finally investigating his behavior. They recounted how Mr. Hughes had subtly pressured them to prioritize guests who aligned with his idea of luxury while discouraging efforts to accommodate others. His preferences had become an unspoken rule, reinforced by the threat of consequences for those who didn't comply. Grace's investigation uncovered even more damning evidence. The funds had been carefully redirected through a complex series of transactions designed to obscure their final destination. But Grace's persistence paid off. She was able to trace the money back to a personal account, one that, after further investigation, was revealed to belong to Mr. Hughes himself. This was the proof Olivia needed, evidence of both his discriminatory practices and his financial misconduct. With mounting evidence in hand, Olivia formulated her next move. Confronting Mr. Hughes alone wasn't enough. His corruption ran too deep, and the hotel's reputation was at stake. Olivia decided to involve a trusted ally, Mr. Bennett, a respected board member who had supported her vision for the hotel from the very beginning. Known for his integrity and commitment to fairness, Mr. Bennett was the ideal person to ensure that this issue was handled transparently and justly. Olivia arranged a private meeting in the hotel's boardroom, inviting both Mr. Hughes and Mr. Bennett. She arrived early, organizing the folders of evidence and taking a deep breath to steady her resolve. Mr. Hughes was the first to arrive, his confident demeanor unchanged. Clearly, he was unaware of the true purpose of the meeting. He greeted Olivia with a polite, if slightly dismissive, nod before taking his seat. Mr. Bennett entered shortly afterward, offering Olivia a warm but concerned smile as he settled into his chair. "Thank you both for joining me," Olivia began, her tone calm yet authoritative. "I've called this meeting to address a serious issue within the Havencrest Hotel." Mr. Hughes raised an eyebrow, his expression faintly dismissive. "Of course, Miss Carter. I'm always happy to assist with any matters regarding guest experience." Olivia held his gaze, her voice unwavering. "Mr. Hughes, over the past several weeks, I've been conducting an investigation. I've observed staff behavior, reviewed guest complaints, and examined financial records. What I've uncovered is not only disappointing, but entirely unacceptable. A flicker of concern crossed Mr. Hughes's face, though he quickly masked it with his usual smooth demeanor. "I'm not sure I understand," he said, his tone even. "These are reports from guests who felt unwelcome in our hotel," Olivia Carter said, sliding the folder across the boardroom table toward Mr. Hughes. Her voice was steady, but her tone left no room for misinterpretation. "They were ignored, dismissed, or outright turned away because they didn't fit a certain image. I also have statements from staff members confirming they were pressured to prioritize specific guests while marginalizing others." Mr. Hughes's expression darkened, his jaw tightening. "I'm sure you're mistaken, Miss Carter," he replied tersely. "We uphold high standards here, and sometimes certain guests simply don't meet those standards." Olivia's eyes narrowed, her tone sharpening. "Our high standards were never meant to discriminate against guests based on appearance or economic status. That's a culture you fostered, Mr. Hughes, one that has no place at the Haven Crest Hotel." Before he could respond, Olivia pressed forward. "And that's not all I've uncovered." She gestured to Grace, who handed over another set of documents. "There are discrepancies in the hotel's financial records, transactions that have been siphoned from our accounts and redirected into a personal account. Your account, Mr. Hughes." For the first time, Mr. Hughes's confident demeanor faltered. His face turned pale, and his hands gripped the edge of the table. I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered. "This must be some kind of mistake." Olivia remained calm, her gaze piercing. "There's no mistake. I have documentation for every transaction, including the account details. This is embezzlement, plain and simple. You've not only misled our staff and tainted our reputation, but you've stolen from the hotel to fund your personal interests." Mr. Bennett, the board member Olivia had brought into the meeting, finally spoke. His voice was firm, tinged with disappointment. "Mr. Hughes, is this true? Have you been manipulating both staff and finances?" Mr. Hughes's face flushed with panic, the weight of the accusations visibly crushing his composure. It's not what it looks like," he stammered, his facade crumbling. "I was only trying to maintain the hotel's image, to make it profitable. Some guests just didn't fit." Olivia cut him off, her voice as sharp as steel. "This hotel was built to welcome everyone, not to cater to your narrow vision of luxury. And as for the funds you've taken, I'll be pressing charges. This is theft, and it's a betrayal of everything we stand for." Mr. Bennett shook his head, his disappointment evident. "I supported you for years, Mr. Hughes, believing you shared our commitment to the hotel's values, but this behavior is inexcusable." Mr. Hughes sat frozen, his once confident facade now shattered. He had no defense, no argument to make. The weight of his actions bore down on him as the reality of his choices became undeniable. Taking a deep breath, Olivia felt the tension in the room begin to ease. She had achieved what she set out to do: expose the truth, protect the integrity of her hotel, and hold those responsible accountable. "Mr. Hughes," she said, her tone final, "you are relieved of your duties effective immediately. Mr. Bennett and I will ensure that the necessary legal actions are taken." Hughes rose shakily from his chair, his defeat evident. He cast one last bitter glance at Olivia before turning and leaving the room. His career at the Haven Crest Hotel was over, his reputation in ruins. As the door closed behind him, Olivia turned to Mr. Bennett, who nodded in respect. "You handled this with remarkable strength, Olivia. I'm confident the hotel is in the right hands." Olivia managed a small smile, relief washing over her. It had been a difficult journey, but her commitment to restoring the hotel's reputation and culture had never wavered. With Mr. Hughes gone, and a clear path ahead, she could finally begin the process of rebuilding, ensuring that the Haven Crest Hotel would be a place of inclusivity, respect, and integrity, just as she had always envisioned. As the dust settled from her confrontation with Mr. Hughes, Olivia allowed herself a moment to reflect. This journey had been anything but easy. She had uncovered betrayal, toxic behavior, and corruption within the walls of the hotel she had worked so hard to create. But she had also rediscovered her purpose. The Haven Crest Hotel was more than just a business. It was a sanctuary, a symbol of what true hospitality could and should be. Now, with her values reaffirmed and her mission clear, Olivia was ready to move forward. The road to recovery would be long, but she was determined to rebuild a culture of fairness and warmth that would stand the test of time. In the days following her confrontation with Mr. Hughes, Olivia wasted no time implementing sweeping reforms to rebuild trust among both her guests and her staff. She began by introducing comprehensive training programs aimed at fostering a commitment to inclusivity and respect. These sessions focused on cultivating a service mindset rooted in empathy and equality, ensuring that every team member understood the importance of treating each guest with the same level of respect, regardless of their appearance or background. Olivia also introduced new policies emphasizing transparency and accountability. Clear expectations for staff behavior were set, and employees were given a safe platform to voice concerns without fear of retaliation. Anonymous feedback channels allowed staff members to report any instances of discriminatory practices or mistreatment they witnessed. She knew that real change wouldn't happen overnight. It required consistent vigilance and the trust of her team. Olivia was committed to fostering an environment where open communication thrived, ensuring that her vision was reinforced at every level of the organization. To lead by example, Olivia conducted regular meetings with her management team. These gatherings emphasized the hotel's mission as a place of warmth, inclusivity, and luxury for all. She encouraged her staff to participate in discussions about the hotel's values, urging them to share their ideas and perspectives. This collaborative approach created a renewed sense of pride and unity among the team, making every individual feel personally invested in the success of the Haven Crest Hotel. Olivia's reforms began to show results. Guests who had once felt overlooked now experienced the same attentive service as everyone else. Staff morale improved as employees felt empowered to deliver genuine hospitality, free from the unspoken biases and pressures that had previously dictated their actions. The hotel's reputation began to recover, regaining its standing as a place of elegance and welcome, not just for the wealthy or fashionable, but for anyone who walked through its doors. As Olivia reflected on the journey, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Her experience had taught her that building a successful business wasn't just about luxury or appearances. It was about fostering a culture of integrity and respect, a culture that made people feel valued and seen. By confronting the toxicity within her own establishment, Olivia had reclaimed the Haven Crest Hotel's values and set it on a path toward a brighter, more inclusive future. One evening, Olivia stood in the hotel's grand lobby, watching the scene unfold around her. Guests of all backgrounds mingled, their laughter and conversations filling the air. The staff moved effortlessly among them, their smiles genuine, their service sincere. The Haven Crest Hotel had become more than just a luxurious destination. It was now a symbol of fairness, transparency, and true hospitality, a place where everyone was welcome, no matter who they were. Olivia felt an overwhelming sense of hope and empowerment. She knew that her commitment to these principles would ensure the hotel's legacy for years to come. As she turned to leave the lobby, she carried with her the certainty that the Haven Crest Hotel would continue to stand as a beacon of respect and inclusivity. A shining example of what a business could achieve when built on the foundation of unwavering values.